say that, there were a lot of signs that I didn't listen to right off the bat because I didn't know to pay attention to them. And I think as women, we're actually very used to ignoring the more subtle signs because they're not impacting us enough in a way that makes us take action. So here I am with a 9-month-old baby. I'm starting to have increasing anxiety, increasing insomnia. Those were my primary symptoms, which eventually led to me experiencing depression because I was so exhausted and anxious all the time, and my nutrients were just getting depleted like crazy. And so, of course, I didn't have those hormonal building blocks that I needed to actually make the right hormones at the right time of the month to not only give me a balanced cycle, but also balanced moods. And when I went in to go talk to my doctor, she basically was like, well, your baby's too old for it to be postpartum depression, so I think it's just, anxiety, and I'm going to give you an antidepressant. Totally ignored all of the other symptoms that I was having that was very clearly connected to my period. So very clearly connected to feeling worse right before my cycle, and how that was then impacting me for the 2 weeks leading up to my cycle. Basically, she just refused that they could be connected at all. And so I remember feeling very frustrated at that doctor's appointment because I'm a nurse. I'm used to taking really good care of people and a very holistic approach. And so to really just be brushed off as like, oh, it's nothing, we just basically slap a Band-Aid on it, really was not helpful. And what I noticed for myself when when I would have the mood swings and the irritability leading up to my cycle, it would also exacerbate all of the undealt with emotions. And what I didn't know was really trauma at the time. And now what's super fascinating about this is that they actually have studies now that show that if you have unresolved emotional pain or trauma, which everybody has some degree of trauma, that's typically the theme that will come up for you right before your cycle. So this is typically why we will see these kind of different patterns for different women that not only point us to the underlying dysfunction in the hormones, but actually point us to the unresolved emotional issues that may also be preventing them from healing. So let me just explain that in a little bit more detail. What I started noticing was before my cycle, so about 7 to 10 days before my period, I would start to notice a decreased mood. So my mood would get lower, my thoughts would become more negative. I would start to feel a little bit more anxiety around that time of the month. And but the theme of it was all very focused around negative things that had happened to me in the past that I actually had not dealt with. So rejections, emotional pain, memories of, different things that had gone on in my life that were just like on a loop or a replay throughout my cycle. And what I found in not only in my own healing journey, but also in watching women and helping them to balance their hormones, is that when we address the physiologic root causes of not making enough of the right neurotransmitters and the right hormones that 7 to 10 days before your period, that will give us a certain measure of healing. Like I would say about 80 to 85% of healing and resolution. That other 25, 15, 20, 25% really does depend on how willing we are to address those emotional issues as they come up. So for me, if I notice right before my cycle that I'm having a low mood, I'm having some depressive thoughts, maybe some anxiety, and the theme is rejection. And I actually hear this a lot from women. They'll say something like, my friend didn't text me back, and instead of just being like, oh, she's busy with her kids, my brain went to, she doesn't love me anymore and she doesn't value me. That is an emotional and probably a spiritual root of rejection that needs to be dealt with. So we address the physical issue, which is the physiologic, biologic dysfunction that's happening, that's leading to low progesterone, that then leads to low serotonin. We address that by healing the gut-brain connection and making sure that the liver is functioning optimally. And that helps it so that we can have the emotional capacity to then deal with the emotional root or the spiritual root of rejection that's showing up. And for different women, this shows up as different patterns. Some women tend to experience more rage or anger, which for me, when I'm looking at their overall picture, what that points to is liver dysfunction, the liver not metabolizing hormones appropriately. But then we also want to look at, what is the anger telling us? Is there a theme to the things that you're angry about? Those are the kind of things that we want to look at. Are you only angry at your husband, or are you angry about everything? Is that anger, does it feel like powerlessness, or does it feel like hopelessness? Those kind of digging into those emotional patterns will actually give us clues on where the emotional healing needs to take place and what we need to do to address that emotional component of healing. One of the most common questions that I get is, how do we